Hi, good afternoon. We'll get started in a few minutes. For those that just joined, we'll get started in another minute or so. So we'll get started. We'll go ahead and get started. So hi, everyone. My name is Erica Cornier, and I serve as the Vice President of Government and Corporate Relations at Indotronix International Corporation. On behalf of Indotronix, I would like to welcome everyone to our webinar, Hiring Veterans in 2020 and Beyond. I would like to start expressing our gratitude to all of those in uniform serving us today and in the past. I'd like to wish you all a belated Happy Veterans Day. For those who may not be familiar with our company, Indotronix is a large global staffing company with a focus specifically on serving and connecting clients with talent for a wide range of skills and across most industries, including aerospace and defense, financial services, telecommunications, life sciences, and utilities, just to name a few. So a couple of housekeeping items. All participants are on mute. However, we still would love your participation. Please use the question tab on your panel to ask panelists any questions that you may have. And at the end of the discussion, we'll have a Q&A session and the panelists will answer your questions. Please be sure to type your questions in the question box and not in the chat box. The chat box may be used to send messages to the organizers. We will also have 3 polling questions during the webinar. We encourage you to participate, and we will share the results of the polls with our panelists and with all of you. With that, it is my pleasure to introduce our moderator for today's webinar, my colleague, Kyle Laulo, Director of Client Services and Veteran Affairs at Indotronix. Kyle manages our veteran hiring program, and he is also a military spouse with a passion for veterans assistance. Over to you, Kyle.
Thank you, Erica, and thank you to everyone who has joined. We're using the hashtag Indotronix for Vets for all social media posting for the event and for marketing. If you plan on posting, feel free to use that hashtag. Let's begin with some recent facts about veteran unemployment provided by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The Bureau of Labor Statistics estimated that 500,000 veterans were unemployed as of last month, October 2020. This is almost double the estimated 284,000 veterans who were unemployed last year. The purpose and goal of this webinar is to highlight best practices for veteran hiring programs in 2020. I'm sure we can all agree that 2020 has been a disruptive year and has made an impact on all of our veteran hiring programs. We thought it would be good to host a webinar that would allow successful program managers to share some of their experiences as they have traversed the new normal of 2020 and beyond. We have a strong panel for you today coming from a very diverse background. I'd like to introduce them to you. First, we have Lisa Young, Vice President of Military Talent Recruiting at Wells Fargo. Lisa, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you very much, Kyle. It's great to be here. So I do not have military service myself. However, my dad was 82nd Airborne, so I'm an Army kid. And my grandson currently serves in the United States Marine Reserves. I've been in the military talent recruiting space for a very long time now. Started out in the defense industry. So I used to work for Bell Helicopter here in the Dallas area. And that's really where I got my passion for military recruiting. At Bell, they had roughly about 36% veteran density. And it wasn't too hard to attract veterans to your organization when a lot of them knew your product from being in theater. But I had the opportunity to make a change and move over to Wells Fargo, which was just starting its military journey about 6 years ago. And while I had that opportunity, we also had less than 3% military density at Wells at the time I came over. So I'm really looking forward to sharing with all of you some of the insight that I have having created that military veteran program. And I'm happy to say that we are at 6.6% veteran density now. So we have doubled our veteran team members since we started our program. So anxious to share some of that with you today.
Awesome, thank you. Next, we have David Shantz, Senior Training Specialist with the DoD Skill Bridge Development Team at General Dynamics IT. David?
Carol, thanks for having me. Yeah, so I'm Dave Shantz. I did 20 years, 6 months, 1 week in the Navy. I just retired this past February, but not before going out and doing a DoD Skill Bridge opportunity with General Dynamics Information Technology. It's an amazing program and certainly a program that every transitioning service member should have the ability to do on their way out. It allows for active duty service members to intern or do an apprenticeship with a company of their choosing for up to 180 days with the hope of being hired on at the end. We've seen tremendous growth. In 2019, we saw 8,600 participants for calendar year 2019, and that's out of over 200,000 transitioning service members. From January 1st to June 30th of 2020, even during the pandemic, we saw 10,600 participants. So the program is certainly growing. It's just an amazing opportunity that costs little to nothing for companies to take part in, little to nothing for service members to take part in. Everybody should definitely do their research and try to do a skill bridge opportunity before they leave service.
Awesome, thanks, Dave. Next, we have Margaret O'Donnell. She is Manager of Military and Veteran Engagement Programs at Rutgers Business School. Margaret?
Thank you, Kyle. Like you, I was a military spouse, and that experience as both a military spouse and then a veteran spouse developed in me a passion for helping people make that military to civilian transition. I get to do that formally in my role at Rutgers Business School, where I work with student veterans and the companies that want to hire them. And that's not just from a recruiting standpoint, it is from a military cultural competency training standpoint, helping with veteran hiring initiatives, certainly, but also with things like veteran employee resource groups. And I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Great. So we are having some technical difficulties with our other panelist, Stephen Hartley. He is Vice President of the Office of Diversity and Inclusion at Guggenheim Partners. He is trying to join in, so hopefully he'll join in here soon. But let's just keep going. This is a live event, so that's how it goes sometimes. So today we're going to have three major topics of discussion. First, we're going to dig into how 2020 has changed program activities for our panelists. Next, we'll talk about transition assistance programs and veteran service organizations, how they've adapted to the new normal. And then we'll close it out with program success stories from our panelists. We will lead in each topic with a relevant audience polling question. And we'll close with audience questions. You can use GoToWebinar to type in questions. If you look in the tool, in the menu, there's a tab that says questions. If you pull down, you can type in your question. I will read them aloud to the panelists at the end of the webinar. Okay, so let's try polling question number 1. I'm going to share the question. Hopefully you can see it. How has the current environment affected veteran hiring compared to pre-COVID-19? And I will launch it. We're getting some responses. Okay, I'm going to close it. And I'm going to share. Looks like 47% say it's harder and 42% say no change, which is interesting. All right. So let's move on to our first topic. How has 2020 changed your program activity? Obviously, COVID-19 has deeply impacted our industry, but it's not just COVID. 2020 has been a crazy year. So the question to the panelists is, how has this specifically impacted your program, and what have you done to adapt? Let's start with Lisa in leading off that question.
Sure. So I was very surprised by your polling responses. It has completely blown up what Wells Fargo normally does. So we tend to be a very high-touch organization. We like to have a lot of in-person events. We have a lot of signature events where we bring military and diversity and early talent. We like to meet face-to-face. And so all of those programs, obviously everything has changed. The biggest change I would say I saw was on with our base strategy. So bases and installations. We have 21 bases and installations that we have relationships with, and we have base relationship managers and base staff from our team members who serve all of those different bases. So for example, the one that I serve is Fort Campbell. And we would normally be on Fort Campbell 4, maybe 5 times a year at their TAP organized career fairs and at other events that we would sponsor throughout the year. The Army Navy game was always a big one that we like to sponsor. But unfortunately, we can't travel. We have a travel ban at Wells Fargo, and there's no activities happening on post. So those organizations, we have always found the soldiers in those scenarios are very much face-to-face people as well. They don't really know what they don't know, and sometimes they don't get a lot of help coming out of those formal TAP programs. So that opportunity to snag them face-to-face at an event is extremely important. So how do you replace that when that isn't happening? I would like to say we have found the magic answer to that. We haven't quite yet. We have been trying to keep very close tabs with and keep those relationships with the personnel that we have on post. We've been doing a lot of emailing, and we are right now looking into something that I'm calling tele-recruiter, following along of the telemedicine or teledoc kind of visits that you might be having with your physicians now. We are going to do a pilot at Fort Campbell and have soldiers sign up for what we will do, something along this lines, a face-to-face Zoom kind of meeting, and do a tele-recruiter opportunity to get with those folks. That's been the biggest change for us, is pulling everything in-house. Everything has gone to virtual. It's all gone to a virtual platform. And then trying to find those ways to connect where they just there now.
Great. How about you, Dave?
Yeah, so the challenges for 2020 have spread, wide and far. The defense contracting industry hasn't really taken too much of a hit because the military is still going to continue to be funded. Projects still need to be ran. So I don't believe that the hiring in the defense industry has really been affected too much, but we have seen quite a few other organizations suffer as far as their hiring. It has either slowed down tremendously or stopped completely because of COVID. Maybe their business wasn't really set up to be online or remote, especially with things like manufacturing, right, where you have to put your hands on something. You can't really do that over a computer. So I agree with the polls that were just taken, the split, because I do think that we've seen a lot of everything, right? Certain industries are affected more than others. But one of the things that this has created was opportunity for all businesses, right? To find another way, maybe a more effective way or efficient way to do business. And a lot of companies are stretching their comfort zones to to find that next way of how to do business in 2020 and possibly beyond.
Great. Margaret?
Well, after years of telling people about firm handshakes and elevator pitches, we are saying things like, stay off the elevator. Don't reach out your hand to someone. So the entire process for us, where we're sort of preparing people to meet employers, has changed. And obviously school, you must hear, is primarily remote. And that means that all of our events, the events that organizations like Lisa's, Wells Fargo want to attend, those are all remote. That's new to all of us. But the students had already been expressing to us that they were experiencing elements of remote interviews already. And some of those were via things like Zoom and whatnot, but there's also a lot of AI that has been integrated. And I think this situation has fast forwarded a lot of those things that were in experimental stages, to an absolutely kind of must have. The other thing that we're facing is that the pandemic has led to a number of National Guard activations. And in the past, when we had a number of people activated, they would know it. They would prepare their professors. They would know when they would be gone and when they would come back. These are, rapid activations, 48-hour notice or less in some cases. So we've been dealing with a little bit of that too. So it's been a huge challenge at Rutgers, in New Jersey, and I think throughout universities across the country.
Mm-hmm. So you kind of touched on my next question is, what trends do we see coming, as a result of this crazy year? Margaret, you want to take that?
Yes, yeah, I let the cat out of the bag a little bit, I think, because that was a trend that we were already seeing, and we're new to all of it too, and I think that's the really important part. It's new to the employers, it's new to the students, it's new to the educational institutions. We're all feeling our way through the best practices about sudden remoteness, but we're doing the best that we all can, and we're changing the way that we prepare our students and our student veterans too for interviews and for events. And at the moment, I think that's the best that we can do. But we see it as something that is going to remain in part as part of the interviewing and hiring process and our preparation for our students to enter the workforce.
Great. Anyone else have any predictions for emerging trends?
I'll add one. I think work from home is here to stay, working remotely. I would anticipate that we will see a lot more remote opportunities now that we've been able to prove to the organizations that we work for that the walls don't come down around us when we don't go into an office. That, I think, is going to bode very, very well for veteran spouses, military spouse employment. That spouse employment really does have an impact on if we can offer remote work. We see a lot of spouses who are like, I'd love to take a role, but I know in 3 months I'm going to be in San Antonio instead of at Fort Dix. So we have to recognize the needs of military spouses. So I'm really hoping that one of the good things that comes out of the pandemic and out of 2020's lockdown is that organizations recognize the opportunity to work remotely.
Agreed. Yeah, hopefully it'll help with mobility. Back in the day, people would move wherever because costs of living were kind of equal, but that's not true today. So hopefully remote work will help with that. So great. All right, so let's move on to our next polling question. I will share it here. What is your best source for hiring veteran candidates? Attendees, hopefully you can see that. There we go, we're getting some answers. All right. Pretty even split here. Wow. Okay. So there's the results. Looks like most of us are getting our hires from job boards and referrals, and then job fairs, and then staffing companies. All right. So our next topic is the impact of 2020 on transition assistance programs and veteran service organizations. And I just want to say, for the benefit of the audience, people who may not know, a TAPS program, a transition assistance program, is one that's on base or on post, where we engage a candidate who's a military candidate moving out of transition into civilian employment. And a veteran service organization, a VSO, is a external organization that helps veterans in general, such as wounded warrior. So again, traditionally, a TAPS program allows us to engage a candidate on post or on base directly face-to-face. That obviously has changed with 2020, and it's probably impossible in many cases. I know, Lisa, you've already touched on some of this. Anything else to add on that?
Well, I don't want to steal Dave's thunder, but I would also talk about this program. So I might toss this one over to Dave in a minute here. But again, transition assistance programs we just don't have the contact. So you have to make that contact up. With veteran serving organizations, so all of the relationships that we have, again, there is no face-to-face, there are no job fairs. So we are doing a lot more with engagements into our business. So my team goes into the lines of business. We find military-friendly opportunities to employ, and then we are proactively going out to the veteran serving organizations with flyers that we send to them and say, this is the job description, this is what we're looking for, please send us your folks. So we're having to do it much more proactively, and we are having to go to them, and that's very labor intensive. It's much easier to send a couple of recruiters to a job fair and let them spend a couple of hours than what we're having to do now with every VSO, with every one of our engagements. It takes a much different lens and a lot more manpower from our recruiters. So Dave, I'm going to toss it to you for the conversation about Skills Bridge and how folks should definitely be using that program.
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, so the SkillBridge program has grown tremendously. Like I said, it's an opportunity that every service member should really look into, at least before leaving the service. You have the ability to do an internship while on active duty, so you're still getting all of your pay and benefits. There's no change in pay or anything, so you're able to support yourself while on an unpaid internship, which is really appealing to companies. Not having to pay for talent, getting to kind of test drive, right? You as the service member, is that company a good fit for you? And the company getting to test drive you as a service member, as a worker, you know, is the company culture right for the both of you? Is a tremendous opportunity. There are internships and apprenticeships alike. So SkillBridge is also a great opportunity for a service member who wants to change career fields, right? If you've done something for 20 years and you just don't want to do it anymore and you want to completely change focus, SkillBridge allows you to do that by either taking an unpaid internship or doing an apprenticeship. Networking, this is huge these days. There are more people that are getting hired these days because of who they know instead of what they know. So getting out there, starting your transition early, look into the SkillBridge program, understand what you want to do and where you want to live to help focus your search. Reach out to those companies and those recruiters, find out what opportunities that they have. Networking is not just saying hi to somebody online, right? It's creating a relationship, having them think of you when there's an opportunity that comes around, or having them remember you and you know, wanting to offer you that opportunity. Yeah, so take SkillBridge. I know Lisa's company, Wells Fargo, takes part in it through the Hiring Our Heroes Corporate Fellowship Program. We are reaching almost, I think we're almost 500 companies approved through the DoD. And when I checked yesterday, there were about 50 companies that had very strong online presence for the SkillBridge program, meaning that their opportunities are either online or hybrid, both online and in person. So just about every industry is covered through SkillBridge. You can do construction, operations manager, whatever you can think of. It's pretty much all covered in SkillBridge. Basically lean into yourself. What do you want to do? Where do you want to live? And let's find you an opportunity.
So a question for you, Dave. What would you recommend a company do? Engage SkillBridge directly or go through a VSO like you mentioned before?
No, I would absolutely engage the DoD SkillBridge program office directly. There's a short questionnaire, a process that a company would fill out. Just some basic questions on what kind of positions you're offering. What do those positions look like in the open market? So, for instance, the Navy used to power their ships with boilers, right? We don't do that anymore. So if you're going to train somebody to be a boiler technician, right, that's not really beneficial because the longevity of that job or that company is not really going to be around for too much longer. So yeah, absolutely engage the DoD SkillBridge program office. Short questionnaires, and then you'll get your company's name listed on the approval list. If it comes back approved, you'll get to indicate the locations where you can support veterans transitioning service members on a map that's advertised on the SkillBridge page. But yeah, going through a VSO is not really necessary, and actually it kind of spreads the onus, right? It spreads the ownership when the ownership should really be on the service member and the company. Making sure that everything is good with that transition.
Great. So Stephen, looks like you breached the wall, man. Congratulations.
Your forehead never looked so good. Now, I apologize to everyone who's attending this webinar. I had some fantastic technical problems, but I appreciate your patience. And I guess it just is another aspect to the times that we're living in. So I appreciate you carrying on and being flexible with this. And I typically am not 25 minutes late to a meeting. So.
No problem. Stephen, if you could, maybe tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I work at Guggenheim Partners. We're a financial services firm where we specialize in 3 areas of business: investment management, securities, and insurance. I work in the Human Resources Department in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. And my role within that office is I oversee the compliance of equal employment opportunity for Guggenheim. So what that means is anytime there is investigation into a claim of harassment or discrimination, that comes through our office. So I would oversee that along with my manager. Also would look into anytime an employee might need an accommodation to help them perform their job. It rises to the level of disability. Even if it doesn't rise to the level of a disability, would look into that to accommodate an employee's needs to help them perform their job. And I also assist in request for proposals. So there's a request coming from the investment side or security side, and they have to invest money, and they have questions related to human capital. That goes through our office too, and I oversee that aspect to our work.
Great. So I believe you work with VSOs, is that correct?
I do work with some VSOs, and the reason I'm here on this call is because my work at Guggenheim, I have been so lucky in that I've been with Guggenheim since 2011, and with the Office of Diversity and Inclusion since 2012. And in 2013, we implemented a Veterans Initiative at Guggenheim. So I've really seen it since the very first stages. And we call the initiative, we use the acronym GIVE, but Guggenheim Invests in Veterans Every Day. And it's a three-pronged approach. So it's employee engagement, philanthropic support, and professional development. And the professional development side, we've created a 10-week summer internship for recently transitioned vets, most of whom are still in school and working on whether it's their graduate degree or undergraduate degree, but they've recently transitioned. We usually look at that window of within 2 years, but we're helping them get their foot into the private sector. So they've worked so hard having a previous career in the DoD, in the military career, and now they're interested in having a career in finance, and so we help them along with that. So our internship program is called the Veterans Transition Assistance Program, and we really focus on that T, the transition piece. And I can talk more about that when we get to that point in this presentation, which may be now because I was 25 minutes late.
Yeah, so our topic right now is the impact of 2020 on TAPs and VSOs. So, so I know you did have some input on that.
Right.
And, you know, how has your engagement with VSOs changed, you know, from this crazy year?
Well, so our involvement with VSOs, when I'm thinking of VSOs, Veteran Service Organizations, we deal with Veteran Service Organizations that align with our strategic vision at Guggenheim with veterans, and that's the transition piece. So the Commit Foundation with Anne Marie Craig, 4Block with Mike Abrams, those are two organizations that we align very closely with and work closely with, and have been feeders into our VTAP program. So our work with them hasn't changed so much. So I can't really speak to how it's affected the VSOs, but for the VTAP, I can speak to. So the VTAP typically has been an in-person internship. And it's been where we've had 3 main offices participate. We've had the New York office, the Chicago office, and the Santa Monica office participate. And that has shifted, right? Even though most of the jobs still center in those 3 main office locations, it's been online. It certainly was this last summer, and it's projecting to be, it looks like it will be in 2021. So that's shifted how the program runs. And we really had to turn our focus on how we were going to run the program on a dime, you know, because all of that was in March, mid-March, when we were getting the news of, hey, we're going to be working remotely. Are we even going to do this VTAP program? And there were a lot of financial institutions that weren't going to go through with the program or internships at all. But one of the things that we're very proud of with the VTAP is it's a very sustainable program. It's low touch, high impact, based on a lot of the volunteer efforts from those who are engaged within the firm. And we've really constructed it with 5 main components. And there are 5 main components that can be done in person or online, whether that's classroom instruction, mentorship, on-the-job training, networking, volunteerism. We had a very successful summer in 2020, and it was all done remotely. We didn't have anybody. I believe we had one of the veteran associates in New York, but you know we had one in Oklahoma, a few in Chicago. So it really didn't make a difference of where they were based. So just being able to be adaptable and flexible and just roll with the changes, I think that's the key.
Right. Great. Anyone else have any other thoughts?
So not everyone transitions from directly from military service into employment. Some people transition to school. So we actually try to get our presence on bases, and you know, due to COVID, have not you know, been able to visit the comparable, you know, to job fairs or education fairs and education offices and things like that. Where my office has you know, bridged those two, we've participated in a program called Hiring Our Heroes Corporate Fellowship Program. And great companies like the ones here are the employers that get to work with the fellows and have them in, you know, working in their job sites, remote job sites in many cases this year. But as an educational institution, we provide the educational component that they have for about 1 day a week. So we've missed doing that in person because, as Dave alluded to earlier, networking is very different now that it's almost exclusively online. There's a big component of it with meeting them in person, but we've tried to certainly make up for that with doing it well online too. But I like to mention that, and a shout out to the people who created the GI Bill, which is an excellent way for people to transition from a military career to a different civilian career, especially, or to enhance their opportunities in the career that they were already trained in.
Right. It's all part of the ecosystem. It's great. Okay.
And Kyle, if I could just say one more thing about how this has shifted. I really think it's also placed a great focus on how veterans can succeed and how they excel. You put them into a situation and they just knock the cover off the ball 9 times out of 10. I'd even say 10 times out of 10. So even though they were expecting an internship, because they'd all been hired back in January, February, they were expecting an internship that was going to be in person, something that was completely different than what they were given. But they made do with it, and they excelled. They were put into some very difficult situations, and talk about having to have incredible work ethic, independence. You don't have somebody looking over your shoulder every day. They were very autonomous. And so one of the great things, though, I will say about being in a remote working environment is that it really opened up a lot of people's schedules during the day. So there could be more check-ins. But the work that was completed and the work that was produced by the Veteran Associates this last summer, I would say even exceeded some of the work that was done in previous years in person. And what that showed is one of the missions of the Veterans Transition Assistance Program, which is it's a twofold program. It's not just for the veterans. Of course, that's the main objective, right? But it's also the other side of that coin is to really educate the hiring managers within Guggenheim. Here are the benefits of hiring veterans into the workforce. One of the many challenges I feel that veterans have when they're coming into the workforce is translating their experience from the military into private sector, into civilian sector. What they did when they were in the military, how do I translate that? That's a common question that they have. Well, when you can see it on a day-to-day basis, these hiring managers, it's almost like their eyes open up. Oh my God, I always knew that, tremendous benefit, but when you see it in person, the benefit to that is long lasting. And we've seen that over the last 8 years that we've had senior leaders from the very top see the benefits of this program. And I think that has real lasting effect and real positive change. And my whole point to this was, having been in an online environment, which would have been a real challenge to many people, they truly did excel.
That's awesome. Thanks, Stephen. All right, so let's move on to our polling question number 3. And I am going to share it here. What is your biggest challenge in hiring veterans? Attendees, hopefully you can see that. What is your biggest challenge in hiring veterans? There we go. Getting some answers. Looks like this is a popular topic, matching military skills to civilian job requirements. All right, I'll share the results here. All right. So let's move on to our final topic, and that's program success stories from our panelists. We're going to do a round robin response here. Yes.
I'm sorry. Can I touch on that poll for 1 second?
Absolutely.
Can you
Yeah,
bring up those statistics again?
you betcha. Yeah.
So one of the things that I'm seeing, especially on LinkedIn, is companies are really leaning in towards aptitude, right? Understanding that they no longer need somebody to have 5 or 10 years in a certain job market to be successful, right? They're leaning into their own training program within their company. So understanding somebody's aptitude and understanding that even though they don't have the experience in that job field, uh, being able to get trained up in a relatively decent amount of time and do a good job for that company. I'm seeing a lot more companies move into that model instead of just looking for, kind of single dimension. You've got this experience, so yes, I'll engage in conversation with you, or you know what I'm saying. There are a lot of companies who are now reaching across career fields to bring on top talent because they're realizing their own ability in getting that person up to speed to do a good job for them.
Great. Awesome. Thanks, Dave. All right, so we're going to close it out with our final topic is program success stories. We'll have our panelists each share some best practices from their program, and it doesn't necessarily have to be about COVID or 2020. We're just looking to hear some of your best practices. So let's start with Lisa. Go ahead.
Sure. And I feel like Dave and my fellow panelists here, Stephen and Margaret, set me up really well for the success story that I want to share with you all. Getting the hiring managers and getting the business ready to hire veterans and to be interested in hiring veterans is your first step. So one of the things that we did, going to Dave's conversation about aptitude, was we looked at our job descriptions. And so at a large company like Wells Fargo, you can imagine we have literally thousands of job descriptions. And we took several years to go through a project where we looked at all of the job descriptions, and where we could, we have inserted a statement that says or. So 5 years of industry experience or similar experience gained through military service. And by putting that or in required qualifications, we opened up a huge channel of veterans who otherwise could not have even been considered because they did not meet those required qualifications. So my biggest success story and where we saw the biggest lift was in changing those job descriptions and adding the military friendly language to those job descriptions. And we're continuing that project. We take a few job descriptions every couple of months and we run them through the process to get those things approved. And then the other thing, to follow on what Stephen said, is we have done a lot of work with creating what we would call meetings in a box, where we have pre-organized slides that help a recruiter or a recruiting manager go into a line of business and actually talk about the value of a veteran. So what are the roadblocks? How do you read a military resume? How do you get your organization ready to not only to hire veterans, but to retain veterans? So we've done a lot of work with those recruiting managers. And then the final thing that we did is we implemented something called a recruiter effectiveness report. And we are looking at recruiters and the percentages of veterans that they're hiring based on their opportunity. And we're bumping it up against the OFCCP. We're an OFCCP company. So that if the OFCCP target is 5.7%, any recruiter that we have on our teams that is below 5.7%, we are putting through some special coaching to help them understand where they need to be in order to get over that OFCCP benchmark. So lots of our success has come from changing stuff internally, not what we have done to market externally.
Right. That's awesome. Changing how you move your arms and legs. Cool. Dave, how about you?
So getting out there and advertising, I don't want to echo too much of what Lisa said. I think she hit the nail right on the head, right? Companies digging in their job specs and understanding what opportunities could be offered to transitioning service members is always a plus. But then also, getting the word out, right? We see a lot of job fairs now going online. LinkedIn is huge as far as advertising. There are groups across all social media platforms, for transitioning service members and smaller niche groups. So advertising, right? Getting your positions out there early and often, because this is a huge revolving door. I just did some quick math. 200,000 plus transitioning service members every year equates to about 550 per day. That is a ton of transitioning service members every year to try to open the doors up to. So you want to get on board. There's also something called the Work Opportunity Tax Credit Program, which is a Department of Labor program sanctioned by the IRS that allows companies to get tax incentives at the end of the year for hiring certain groups of people. One of which is disabled and out of work veterans. So look into that, and that's one great way to help save your company money by lowering your bottom line at the end of the year. Every year that you employ that service member or that veteran, you get a tax credit from the Department of Labor and the IRS. So that's money back in your pocket. Yeah, but understand what positions would be great for service members. Advertise them early and often, and yeah, just get them on board.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. How about you, Margaret?
So one of the success stories at Rutgers Business School has been a program called the Mini MBA Business Management for Military and Veterans. It's a certificate program. It's now being kind of popularly known as a micro-credential that allows for badging and things like that. But the program has been an in-person program. We usually do it 5 consecutive business days. It's really a tight and efficient use of someone's GI Bill if that's how they're paying. It's a limited amount of time out of the office if their company is sending them, so forth. But it didn't have a national reach. It was really considered kind of a regional program to go to something where you'd have to go every day for 5 days. So the pandemic sort of forced our hand to transition this into, at a minimum, a hybrid program, which is what we had in mind. It looks like it's going to be a fully online program, but that allows companies that already have a national or an international reach, or even people who are short time, they're not out of the military yet, but they know that they want to check out, education, to start taking this program, because with it being completely online, they can participate from pretty much anywhere that they are. So I think our success story has been making, lemonade out of the lemons that 2020 dealt us. And in 2021, I hope lots of people will be looking for Rutgers Business School's Mini MBA in Business Management for Military and Veterans.
Great. Thanks, Margaret. And Stephen, how about you? You're muted, I think.
Of course I am. I want to touch on 2, really. One that I think is a really cool story, success story from one of our past veteran associates who went through the program. He interned in our Santa Monica office and just did all the right things. Like, he met the right people. We always tell the veteran associates, you're going to get out of this what you put in. I mean, everybody wants you to succeed, and he did it. Like, he just put himself to the grind entire 10 weeks, and he worked very closely that summer with the chief of staff to our chief investment officer, Scott Minard. And a full-time position was offered to him at the end of the summer, not with the gentleman who works with Scott, but in the investment program. And a year later, he was called up with Scott to be his deputy chief of staff. So, I mean, just the thought of that, it still gives me goosebumps. Like, to go through the transition program, and then within a year, you're, Scott Minard's deputy chief of staff. When I think of a success story, I think right there in a nutshell. But I also, on a larger scale, more broadly speaking, success stories, to me, and I should mention this because I didn't mention it before, the Veterans Transition Assistance Program at Guggenheim, it's not set up to be a jobs program. So Lisa, you had mentioned at Wells Fargo, you all have a program that is set up to be a jobs program. Bank of America has a jobs program. So you've got 10 coming in, more than likely you've got 10 jobs waiting for them if they perform well at the end of the summer. Ours isn't set up to be that way. It just, we don't have that structure in place, just due to how our firm is structured. So that's why we focus on that transition piece, right? And so we measure success really in what we're giving them in those 10 weeks. And so we're giving them exposure through classroom instruction, networking, mentorship with senior leaders, a lot of really great things. And so when I think of success story 2 with the program, it's hearing from a veteran associate 3 years down the road, and they say, hey, yeah, no, I'm working at JP Morgan, but I want you to know I wouldn't be there had I not spent the 10 weeks at Guggenheim. I didn't know anything about the industry. I didn't know anything about financial services. I didn't even know what I wanted to do. But spending that summer at Guggenheim taught me what I wanted to do. That summer at Guggenheim put me in touch with the right people. That summer at Guggenheim gave me the confidence to get that job at JP Morgan. That's a success story to me also, I think. And that's, year over year, I'm so proud of the program and the men and the women who go through that program. It really is, there's a lot of success that we can talk about, but I think, you know, what gets me going every year, it's my favorite time of the year, is that 10 weeks in the summer. But I think that's really what drives me, is just knowing that we're contributing to their professional development and their future.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, so we do have some questions. Actually, we have like 3 of the same question, so I'll ask it first. I think it's indicative of our audience here. The question is, how do you leverage staffing companies in your veteran hiring, if you do at all? Anyone?
Well, I can take that. So we have a very solid full desk of recruiters. So we don't use a lot of staffing companies. So Kyle, I was very pleased that you asked me to be on this panel, knowing that it was going to be a large staffing company conversation. However, what I can say is where we do use staffing companies and where we do have managed resources, the very best thing that a managed resource organization can do is to let us know when you place a veteran with us, because we can't ask. So if you know, or you can get that veteran to self-ID and let us know we have a veteran as a managed resource, obviously when it comes time to potentially convert that managed resource to a full-time resource, we would love to know where we have veterans. And also I would recommend getting to know the organization's veteran hiring goals. So where is it that you have need? Where are there underutilizations on the staff that you're trying to source into? So that would be my recommendation from a company who doesn't use a lot of staffing agencies. However, where we use them, we really like to know that you are mirroring our total D&I strategy, including veteran.
So that would be a good way for a staffing company to partner with you, is identify those goals and help you with that. So great. Anyone else? That's kind of actually more for Lisa than anyone. Okay, another question we have is, and I think I'm going to split it up into a couple different questions, is can you identify companies that are good at or hit high benchmarks in terms of veteran hiring? Besides Lisa, we know she's awesome. And then the second the second part of that question, maybe you can also answer it, is, you know, what would those benchmarks be? Like, you know, percentage of workforce, or, you know, what are some good benchmarks for a company to pay attention to? Go ahead.
I'll weigh in at least on the first part. We look at rankings from places like the Military Times for best for vets, and they do best for vets educational institutions. They do best for vets companies and things like that. Another great source of information is Diversity Inc. They do some rankings around this as well, and those are great places to look. I'll leave part 2 of the question for some of my fellow panelists to address, though.
So I'm unsure actually of part 2. I mean, you know, how many should you take on? Well, you know, I'm going to be selfish and say as many as you possibly can. You know, I want my fellow service members, you know, to step into success when they come out of the service. As far as the first part of the question, General Dynamics as a whole, and then, you know, the subsidiaries, GDIT, GDMS, those are all companies that have a very good veteran hiring program. Amazon is doing some incredible things. Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin. So a lot of these big name companies that you're probably already familiar with are very heavily invested in hiring veterans. They all are taking part of the SkillBridge program, as well as have their own separate veteran hiring initiatives outside of the SkillBridge program. A lot of these companies are also very military spouse friendly. We kind of touched on that earlier. There's some of the most highly educated and qualified people, and unfortunately have some of the highest unemployment rates. So yeah, so those big companies that you've heard of before are usually very into hiring veterans and do a great job of it.
Great.
Yeah, and I just want to add just real quick, you know, in the financial sector, you get some of the bigger banks like Bank of America. I know JP Morgan and Wells Fargo, you guys hire, you know, tremendous amount of veterans. There's the 100,000, you know, jobs initiative, all great programs. The one thing I would say is for those who are thinking about, you know, well, I want to find an organization that hires a lot of vets. Continue your research into organizations that do hire a lot of vets, but also have systemic programs in place to nurture and really, it's a part of their culture to develop the vets. Because I know that there are some companies that their main focus may be I'll hire the vets, but the retention isn't great. So they may bring them in, but the retention period is not terrific. So there are stats on that also. So if you're thinking, well, I just want to get in somewhere that hires a lot, you can find additional information on those that try to retain.
Great. Okay, well, I think we're about to the end here. I want to thank our panelists so much for your wisdom and knowledge. We want to thank all of our attendees for joining in. We hope you've enjoyed this webinar as much as we've enjoyed hosting it. We will be sending out a summary email to our attendees, so be looking for that. And also stay tuned. We intend to host future webinars on veteran hiring as well as talent acquisition topics in general. So stay tuned for that. So we want to just thank everybody so much for joining. Have a great Thursday and a fantastic weekend. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.